welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 245 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 19 of A Feast for Crows, which is named The Drowned Man.
And as always, we'll chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, unless of course you have the Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tier that includes spoilers. And regardless, hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and other things of note in this chapter. How are you, Mackelly? I'm
doing all right. I'm refreshed. You look refreshed.
It's pretty marginal, my refreshness. I'm weirdly jet lagged.
Yeah, well,
I've only come from the West Coast, but I keep staying up till like 2 a.m. I can't get to sleep. But I'm waking up on East Coast time, so I'm exhausted from this.
Yeah, I guess so. You're not getting the benefit of the West Coast wake up.
How was your vacation, my friend?
It was really good. We had a really good time. We were back on Bald Head Island, which you know is my happy place, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. Drove some golf carts around. I rode my little e-bike all over the island, and yeah, played some family games and stuff at night.
Did you joust?
I
feel like the e-bikes and the golf carts call for jousting.
There was no jousting. No.
Okay, next time.
There was something that's been sticking with me though, that I just can't quite shake. So, one of the days, I can't remember which one, we were all down at the beach. We have two golf carts, two 6-person golf carts. We had 11 people, so it was a tight fit, but we had enough for everybody. One party had one golf cart somewhere, and the beach party had the other golf cart. But my brother-in-law needed to run back to the house, so he had the golf cart, but there wasn't a lot of wind on the beach that day, so it was really feeling hot. So we were waiting for him to come back.
You needed that golf cart to come back.
Right. Yes. So while we were waiting, Stacy's like, let's go in the ocean and cool off. So she and I and my nephew's girlfriend go in the ocean, and we're, relaxing, riding over, jumping over waves and all that kind of thing. And she was like, all right, let's head back in. Jeff will be back any second. I was like, no, let's just stay here until until we see him come back. And she was like, well, I'm going in. You can do what you want. So, of course, I followed her in because, I'm a dutiful husband. Yeah. And my Naomi, my nephew's girlfriend, followed us in, a few seconds behind us. No sooner did we walk the 20 feet from the edge of the water to where we had our stuff and grabbed our towels, but the people at the beach next to us start shouting "shark." And I thought it was a joke because, it's not a funny joke.
That sounds like a joke.
Yes. Yeah. We all turn around, and wouldn't you know, there is a shark fin swimming through the water that we had vacated 25 seconds earlier, only because Stacy's impatient and wanted to start packing things up while we waited.
You're only with us because you're a dutiful husband.
Yes.
Who knows that do what you want means do what I want.
Right. Means come help me pack stuff up. Don't be lazy and sit in the cool water. And because of that,
Wow.
Yeah, I could have a chunk taken out of my leg for all I know if I hadn't followed her in.
Yeah, I think more often than not they don't, but you're right. I would definitely go to the most extreme as well here.
Yeah, right.
That's pretty terrifying.
It's just that it swam right where we were. It's not like it was way out at sea or whatever. It was like right there at like waist level of, the height of the water. And whew, that's something. I'd never experienced that. And just before, it was like a day before, I was talking to my niece, and we were talking about shark attacks, and I was like, there's like 200 shark attacks in the U.S. in a year, and there's so many tens of millions of people that are at the coast. It's such a small percentage. And then the next day, there's a shark staring me in the face.
Yeah, you don't know how many near misses there are. There's 200 attacks. There's like 50,000 close calls.
Right, I guess so. Well, I've never seen a shark fin like that before. No, never. I've seen dolphins. I've never seen a shark fin like that.
Yeah, you see dolphins at the North Carolina coast all the time. That's really exciting when you see them, but you do that is quite common. I've swum with sharks accidentally. I mean, well, I swam in the sea,
did I.
and
Yeah,
there were sharks. That was quite terrifying for me. Everybody else was very excited, but I was just terrified.
So it was a similar situation to what I experienced?
We were out on a boat, swimming off the boat, and the sharks were beneath us. And
okay, yeah.
The slightly funny story about that is that I saw the shark and I stopped blinking and I stopped moving, and I focused on that shark to see what was going to happen, because I figured I would need a head start if he started coming for me, and I'd need to be ready to really swim.
Sure.
Yeah, because I'm going to win this one.
Right.
But because of that, I somehow managed to swim back to the boat without moving, and climb out. But when Carson followed me like 2 minutes later, relaxed and everything, she said, "You didn't see the other two swimming behind you then?" I was like, nope, I did not.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah.
That was the biggest fish I'd ever seen. It was big. I mean, they reckon it was like 4 feet, but I mean, that's a big fish.
It is a big fish. I, of course, have no idea how big. The fin didn't look like it was Jaws that was about to leap out of the water, but
but
it was noticeable from a distance.
You extrapolating the fin to the mouth, it was going to take a big bite out of you.
Yes, I feel like it might have.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I went to Vancouver, British Columbia, which I can highly recommend. It's a beautiful city.
I've always wanted to go. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, you should definitely do it. It's lovely. And we had a really nice time, and our friends saw a bear. So we did not see the bear, but they saw a bear.
Okay.
So that's not quite as scary as a shark, perhaps, but
could be.
Yeah, exactly. It scared me to think of it.
At least a shark you can get away from by getting out of the water.
That's true. Good point. Although land is my natural habitat, and so I feel like I'd lose a race to a bear, but I could really race it. Swimming versus a shark, I'm going to lose that race for sure.
Well, yeah. I follow your drift.
As usual, we had a nightmare journey on the way out and on the way back, which I'm not going to bore everyone with. It was absolutely miserable, but cancellations in both directions, missed flights. We ended up having to get a rental car across the border from Canada to the US. And when you do a one-way rental across a national border, you pay a surcharge, I tell you that.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, I could see.
And when you cross the border on July 1st, which is Canada Day, and July 4th, weekend,
oh, no.
you get a 90-minute holdup at the border as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could see that. That is it's why we decided to stay local, just stay within the North Carolina coast, because flying is just miserable right now.
Yeah, we cannot catch a break. Just every time we fly, something goes wrong. But a funny story came out of it. So we were not scheduled to spend the night in Chicago O'Hare Airport, but we did.
Oh no, that wasn't part of your itinerary.
No, was not on the itinerary. In fact, we added 3 states and 3 cities to our original itinerary.
Oh my goodness!
It was crazy.
That's miserable.
But American Airlines, to their credit, gave us food vouchers, and it was morning, so we decided to go to McDonald's. We very rarely go to McDonald's, as you know. We don't eat meat, so there's not an awful lot on offer at McDonald's.
Sure.
But you can get an egg and cheese biscuit, no, egg and cheese McMuffin, they call it.
Yeah.
And so Carson and I, we had a $12 voucher. She had a $12 voucher. I had a $12 voucher. We went up and we ordered egg McMuffins and a hash brown. And the lady said, "You're not going to use all your voucher, and I can't give you any change. So you want to get some more stuff?" So then we got like a coffee and a smoothie, and then we went over. Yeah. So it was fine. I was happy to pay the difference, but it was like we were like $3 over or something. So she's trying to figure out how to do this, how to do the voucher payment and then the extra payment.
Right.
I get ready and get my credit card out. And she says, "Oh, you cannot pay with a credit card for an overage like this. You have to pay in cash." And I was like,
"Oh my gosh, what?
Really?" So I actually I got my wallet out and I was literally saying to her, "Well, I can't help you because I don't have it." Oh, there's a $20 bill here. So I obviously had a $20 bill in my wallet for the last 10 years and I didn't even
Right.
know about it. I think it was still legal tender, but it must have been pretty close. So I gave her the $20 bill and she was still figuring out how to do this. And she said to me, she and I had a strange relationship, me and this lady. I mean, normally, you know me, I'm trying to charm the ladies, but
Yes. Yes.
it hadn't gone well to this point.
Okay.
And it really took a turn at this point because she said, "Do you want tens or fives?" And I just didn't know how to answer that question because I was like, does she think that I gave her the $20 bill to make change?
Right.
I'm paying the overage.
I
Just
want
give
one
me
of
the
both.
change. That's what I would have thought. One of both and some change, you know?
Yeah.
But I was really puzzled and confused. And I said, tens? I figured I'd go with the big one. Hope
Right.
for the
Yeah.
best.
She's asking.
And she gave me two tens and a handful of change. And I stood there for a good 15 seconds looking at this in my hand and looking back at her. And eventually I just gave up and left. I was like, oh, that'll do. So she paid me some money
Right.
to take this food off her hands. I was like, what? I had no idea. I think it was crazy. It was so crazy. And I was so flummoxed by it. I sort of went into sort of like a sort of overstimulated child sort of like shutdown mode. I was like, I don't know what to do or say at this point.
Just walk away. Walk away.
But even then, it took me like 10 seconds to walk away. I was like, that's so strange. But yeah, I think she was slowly trying to bring McDonald's down.
I guess.
One customer at a time.
Yeah. She was a Burger King employee working on the inside.
Okay then, well, let's get on to business. How do we leave Aeron Greyjoy, the eponymous hero of the drowned man of this chapter? Last we saw of Aeron as a POV, he was calling for the Kingsmoot. Since then, we've seen him get a bit deer in headlights as Big Brother and nasty piece of work Euron was mean to him.
It was mean to him.
Could have been a bit less deer in headlights, I feel, but hey, not to
Yep.
worry. Why don't we give the summary of this one?
Okay. Well, Aeron Damphair climbs out of the sea when his limbs are numb. He's annoyed that he was so unmanned by Euron. He was supposed to have drowned and come back stronger than the weak little brother he was before. He dresses in his salt-crusted clothes and heads up the beach, bestowing a blessing on one of his drowned men along the way. He fortifies himself with the fact that the sea never wearies, nor can he.
The 44 ribs of Naga rise from the ground. The first king of the Iron Islands had built a great hall with her ribs as the pillars. The Grey King had ruled here for 1,000 years. Aeron reflects that men have diminished since those days. Only Naga's bones remain to remind them of the greatness of their ancestors. Aeron climbs up and feels the power of the drowned god. All night he prays, "Grant those assembled the wisdom to pick a true king."
At first light, he calls for the moot to begin. The sea stirs as it should, and Aeron feels the drowned god's presence. The men of the Iron Islands assemble. To Aeron, Victarion looks like the only king, towering above nearly everyone. The ceremony begins with words for Balon. He asks who will succeed Balon as king. There is a silence. None of the serious candidates want to go first. Going last is an advantage.
Aeron demands a king. First up is Lord Gilbert Farwind. His mad eyes match his crazy plan to sail the Ironborn west to a new land where they will rule all. Few call out for him. His gift offerings are sparse. Next is an 88-year-old Eric Ironmaker, a huge man carried by his sons to the dais. More cries for him, partly because his bribe chest is fuller, but Asha brings down his claim by demanding that he stand and take his crown. The old man cannot.
The drum is next. He speaks at length on his family's claim, how it matches that of the Greyjoys. His family histories back his claim, but he drones on for too long and his gifts are too tight-fisted. His claim dies away.
Finally, Victarion speaks. First, he receives a blessing from Aeron. He has no sweet words, but an axe and his giant fists. He tells of his feats as the Lord Captain of the Iron Fleet. He promises a continuation of Balon's work. And now the cries go up, "Victarion, King!" And these are only redoubled when he spills untold wealth in a cascade of silver and gold before them.
A whistle from Asha stops the noise. She makes her bid. writing out the catcalls and mockery she has to endure. She has the true claim as Balon's child, and she promises peace in more lands, Sea Dragon Point and the Stony Shore. Her chests contain the fruits of what the war in the north has won them so far, pebbles, pine cones, and turnips. Crown me for peace and victory, or crown my uncle for war and defeat. The cry goes up strong. Many clearly want this. Damphair is incredulous that she would undo her father's legacy.
But Victarion supporters try to drown hers out. Through this cacophony, Euron's man sounds a giant horn. It pierces everything and quiets the men. It glows red and gold as it's blown, a wail of pain and fury that burns the ears. In the silence after its call, Euron climbs the hill. He's the only Kraken to have never known defeat, to have never bent the knee. He offers both his brother's kingdom and his niece's peace. He will give them all of the 7 kingdoms. To the glory of the drowned god, he adds as an afterthought.
Right, of course. To the glory of the drowned god.
Drowned god fella, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Even Aeron is swept away for a heartbeat. How? As Aegon did with dragons. The horn binds dragons to his will. But there are no dragons. But you see, there are. 3 of them to be exact. And with this, Euron's chests are thrown open. The captains fill their hands with golden gems and shout Euron's name. The day is won, and Aeron is bereft. Well,
yep.
Like we mentioned last chapter, he acknowledges himself. The chapter opens with him acknowledging to himself that he did not put up the best fight that he could have.
That which you pointed out, yes.
Yes, right.
But in pedantry, I'm going to put in pedantry some complaints I have, which are indeed character flaws and character decisions, but around this very point, because he really did do a poor job. He called the Kingsmoot to crown Victarion.
Right.
There were things he could have done. There were strings he could have pulled to make that happen, which he failed to do. And they didn't even involve standing up to Euron, really.
Right, yeah.
They were just logical steps that he failed to take.
Now, I can't deny having foresight last chapter when I mentioned that he sure didn't put up much of a fight when he confronted his brother Euron. But even on first read-through, I thought about how uninspired that confrontation was.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Old habits die hard. A little brother faced with his wicked older brother. It's in his nature to back down and flee.
Yeah, but it's strange because in the eyes of everybody else, he's a completely different man.
Right. Yeah.
He is the prophet, the drowned man. They look up to him and revere him. And for him to not be able to sort of process that into his behavior around his siblings, I feel for him because I act differently with my siblings than I'm a erudite man of the world around everybody else, but I'm a hair-pulling monster around my siblings.
Does that explain Rob's haircut?
Yeah, nice. I'm glad he still listens.
But multiple times, twice, in fact, in this chapter, once at the beginning and once at the all-important last sentence of the chapter, Aeron thinks of the scream of a rusted iron hinge.
Yes, we skipped it because it's kind of poetic, not specific. But that's
yeah.
So the sound is he sort of like hears it in his soul to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah. When it seems all we can go on is what we got in this chapter was him just thinking about it, but it seems to have something to do with Euron because the thought of Euron brings it up both at the beginning and at the end of the chapter.
I wonder, my 2 brother-in-laws, my wife's 2 brothers, one of them put the younger one into the dryer and turned the dryer on. I wonder if it's that.
Could be something like that. It certainly makes you imagine that he's recalling a negative experience with Euron, almost certainly from their youth.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, perhaps the point is, it's when Euron had untrammeled power over him, and now he's got it again.
Oh, yes. Yes, I see the association, and I like it.
So the non-Greyjoy candidates for this were a mixed bag. They were sort of specifically mad, half dead with age, and very boring. And boring's a killer because the drum had a decent candidacy, but
He
he just
did.
bored everyone to tears.
Yeah. You would think his champions would have been like,
Yeah.
enough. We could go through them real quick, though, I think.
Stick to the teleprompter.
Yeah. But first up, we had Gilbert Farwind, who Aaron's, he's thinking to us that a lot in the Iron Islands think that the Farwinds are skin changers. And so, may or may not. We don't know. We've run into skin changers, so it's theoretically possible.
And his platform was to leave the Iron Islands and go west, right? Where he figures there's an undiscovered continent that they can rule with their power and strength.
Yes, yeah. He compares what he wants to do, what he has in mind, to what Nymeria did when she sailed the 10,000 ships and landed in Dorne.
Can I remind you what she sailed the 10,000 ships over? The narrow sea.
Right.
Not the endless ocean.
Right. Yeah, and, they were escaping war,
Right. Yeah, and they were pretty confident there was something the other side of the narrow sea.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely a bigger leap. And the Ironborn are kind of on an upswing right now, It's not likely a platform to win on, to say, okay, we hold parts of the North and we have our freedom, we're electing a king. Now's the time to flee and go to some undisclosed location.
What I would say is, I'd say, Gilbert, listen, you go, bring me back a potato. You're our new king. I tell you that for free. But I ain't climbing in a boat and following you. You're crazy.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I do appreciate him shooting his shot here. He probably figured the Kingsmoot is his one opportunity to make this case for his belief. He's even willing to go first, despite the unlikely position of success by going first. Now, I wonder if possibly he didn't even expect to win. He just wanted to get his idea out there and see if anybody comes up to him afterward and is like, you know what? I think you're onto something. He can, get up enough of a force, enough of a party to make that trek and see what happens.
You're right. 4 years' time, he'll be back. Stronger candidacy.
Right. He did, unfortunately, have some pretty lame gifts. Seal skins, walrus tusks, whalebone armbands. But they're probably pretty valuable items on Lonely Light, which I'm going to talk a little more in detail about in background.
Where he's from, right?
Yeah.
And what is a skin changer? Help me with that. Like a warg of some sort?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the idea? Okay.
Like Varamir Six Skins or Bran
right.
or Jon, as we've seen a bit.
Because I was going to say, if he could literally change his skin, he might want to put on a better appearance for the thing as well than mad-eyed old fool.
Right. Yeah, if he could change his skin into like a dolphin or something, he could go exploring all he wants.
Yeah, that's the other thing, yeah. Really, go do that. Much safer for the rest of us.
Right.
But I was trying to remember, actually, in various readings of this, has anyone successfully crossed the Western Ocean?
No, not that's come back.
I thought some came back having found little islands here and there, but no one had found a continent.
Yes. Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys are the name of the 3 islands that are going to come up in background, in fact.
Oh, I'm sorry for stealing your thunder.
No, it's all good.
So the second candidate is Eric Ironmaker, and his platform was basically his past glories. His candidacy was okay. It was kind of like solid and just a little uninspired. And the fact that he was 88 and so heavy he couldn't stand up. Yeah. Not so old he couldn't stand up, which might have been the impression we gave in the summary, but so heavy he couldn't stand up.
Right.
That's not necessarily... We'll be back here in 6 weeks getting another king. You don't want it.
Yeah, even something he says just doesn't conjure the image of like longevity in a king. He says, I could tell you all of the valor that I won in battle, but at 88 I won't live long enough to finish it. Which
Is that because of the amount of valor or the shortness of the life?
Exactly.
Yes.
It's a clever way of saying I was once a valiant warrior, but not helping your cause with the imagery of the short life left for king.
Also reminding the masses that overweight 88-year-olds don't have a long runway left.
Yeah. His speech was not necessarily inspiring either. He basically did if A equals B, if old equals wise, and if big equals strong, then vote for me. But no one's saying that either of those things are true. So,
good point. Yes. And then Dunstan Drum of the third makes the very good point. Why should it be the Greyjoys? The Greyjoys were elected lords of the Iron Island after they were no longer kings. They were never made kings. They made themselves kings, or at least Balon did twice.
Right.
So why should they now be the hereditary royal family of the Iron Islands? There's no reason for it.
Yeah, he does make a strong case, and Aeron even admits it to himself. That's a good opening. That was a strong opening right there. After Harren the Black and his sons were killed at Harrenhal by Aegon and Balerion, and the Hoare line was extinct, the Ironborn chose the Greyjoys as lords,
right?
Not kings. So it was all going well, except for he blabbed on too long, as we said earlier, and the crowd got bored.
Yeah. So. Yeah. You can blab on a long time as long as you've got a closer, which is a huge chest full of money. But he didn't have that either. He
didn't have that, no. Yeah. But as we're talking about the drum, last chapter, Tarl Thrice Drowned suggested that Meryn Volmark was the true heir of the Black Line, which is House Hoare's line. But he never made a play for the Seastone chair.
Oh, that's true. I hadn't thought of
present.
That. Yeah.
So I guess he didn't buy it either. Meryn himself.
The next point I wanted to make was another perhaps tactical error by Aeron, but I'm not going to put this one in pedantry because it's too abstract for being a pedantry thing. But the history of Nagas Bones maybe make this the wrong place to have the Kingsmoot, because these bones invoke in the Iron Islanders' hearts memories of their greatness, of when they bestrode the west of the Seven Kingdoms as great kings.
Right.
And if you want someone like Victarion who says, you know what we're going to do? More of the same.
Right.
Maybe you shouldn't host it. Yeah, exactly. Maybe you shouldn't host it in the place that reminds people of the greatness of their ancestors.
Yes, I follow your point. Yeah.
Opening the door to someone like Euron, who's he's got the vision thing down. He's like, the whole Seven Kingdoms, dragons. Right.
Yes.
And Woodwind.
I guess Aeron could not have imagined that Euron's platform was going to be, I'm going to bring you dragons in the entire entirety of Westeros. But you're right. He did probably know that Victarion was going to continue doing what Balon started. And, if he thought that through.
But you might think, well, Nagas Bones are the right place for it because Balon claimed the throne, which had lain empty for, hundreds of years, whatever it was. So maybe he wanted it to be there, but with hindsight,
right?
It's pine cones and pebbles and raiding some fishing villages. This isn't the venue for that. You could tell that down the pub. This is the venue for binding 3 dragons and taking the 7 kingdoms for ourselves.
Yeah, I follow your point. I do.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like those 3, Farwind, Ironmaker, and the Drum, were the undercard. And as Meldred Merlin points out, once the Drum's cheers died down when they saw that his chest of gifts were pretty lame, Meldred Merlin shouts out, "Make your claim, Victarion. Let us be done with this mummer's farce." And one thing I'll point out about Merlin there is that later on, he shouts for Asha. So clearly he was swayed. He thought it was a mummer's farce. This was Victarion's moot to lose. Or
or he was in on the whole
Oh,
the one who goes last wins, and he
yes.
wanted Victarion to go first to blow his claim.
Yes, as soon as you said or, I was like, I know what you're going to say. Yes, that could have been it. Right.
uh,
He was a plant. He was an Asha plant.
um, so, I mean, Victorian's vision of business as usual, it just never felt like enough. It certainly turned out that way. It's a good pitch if everybody is content and thriving. And like you say, they've had some advances in the time we've been reading the books. The Iron Islands have grown. You know, they've won some territory. They've reclaimed their kingship. You know, so
Right.
there's a bit of an upswing. But there seemed, I mean, just from the various lords, there was enough discontentment to suggest that saying, I want to be just like Balon was a recipe for mediocrity, not for success.
I agree. And as you said earlier about how we're going to talk about, how you said earlier about how we're going to talk about later, things
Mm-hmm.
Aeron could have done to help sway this, he does say that 9 sons of Quellan Greyjoy, there was one mightier than the rest who knew no fear. It's that kind of thing that Aeron could have done to also discredit Euron. He doesn't have to come straight out and say Euron's a bad guy. He could have also said Victarion, who has been here as the Lord Captain of the Iron Fleet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, big Victarion up and remind everyone, and Euron's one of those brothers who he's way better than as well.
Right. Just there's subtle ways that you could kind of sway this, and his voice carries a lot of weight. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
he is Damphair.
Yeah, I wonder if he feels a sense of, because we're getting his inner thoughts here, we don't feel this. What we feel is that sort of little brother, sort of like cowardice, sort of shrinking from the fight. But I do wonder if he also feels, as the prophet, he has to sort of stay nominally neutral at this point.
Yes, I think he does. He's trying to play like, yes, as you said, like MC, not
Right,
pick a side, but he
right.
does make this. He doesn't make a comment about anyone else, like
Yeah,
one
yeah.
mightier than the rest of the 9 sons of Quellan Greyjoy. So he does put a little bit in there, and I think there's things he could have said that might have carried more weight. We'll get to them in a minute,
Yeah.
but Asha steps in and kind of puts a damper on the chance for Victarion King.
Or at very least, as we feared last time, as everybody feared, including Asher and Victarion, she splits the anti-Euron vote down the middle.
Yes, she does. Unfortunately for everyone involved, she does.
Yeah. And partly because her claim is strong. I mean, she's got the whole being a woman thing working very much against her, but she is the child of Balon, and they're not. They're just the younger brothers.
Yeah, and you know her platform is pretty solid too. You know, planning on
And
expanding the lands by 10 times what they currently have, end this
yeah,
unsustainable war, make allies with the North.
I also liked the fact that she was saying, hey, these guys, they big up their achievements, but they all end in defeat.
Right.
Balon, claimed the crown twice, but he got beaten down twice and then murdered once.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not been successful, this, and there has to be a different way for the Iron Islanders to both coexist, but also to live their own lives.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, she mentions Baelor Blacktide as an example of those who have lost loved ones in these wars that Balon kept starting that were never going to be ultimately successful. And it got me thinking that, his idea was so similar for the future as what Asha points out. And her mentioning him makes me think that possibly they discussed their thoughts previously, not on screen, and and they both kind of had the same idea. We know that Baelor fostered Triss Botley, and Triss is one of her
Oh,
champions, and Baelor was the second one to shout out her name behind her uncle Roderick. So it made me wonder. I started thinking about that conversation that Baelor had with Victarion last chapter, where he approached Victarion with questions and ideas, very much what Asha proposes, and wondered if maybe he was sent by Asha to plant the idea before they had their talks where she discussed the peace with the North.
Or he was looking to see if he would be willing to switch his vote to Victarion.
Right.
If Victarion was willing to consider this, he might go Victarion because he had a better chance of winning than Asha ever did.
Right. Yes, could have been that too.
Yeah. I'll say I think it was a strategic error by both Victarion and Asha not to go negative on Euron. His Achilles heel here was that he murdered Balon. Proof was hardly necessary. Just keep beating that drum, beat it again until people cannot get it out of their heads. Asha does go negative, but she does it on Victarion, the counting thing. She says he can count to 20, but he needs to take his socks off. But that was the moment to segue into, but at least he didn't murder your king.
Right. She says this. She brought it up to him in the tent with, maybe 50 captains or whatever around. She brings up the fact that he just coincidentally shows up the day after their king dies. But now she's got the whole moot, the whole Kingsmoot at her. Right. Listening to the words coming out of her mouth, now's the time to say something. And I kind of felt like she did Victarion more dirty than Euron. She called him unintelligent, like you said, and that Euron has the better claim. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
You're already splitting the vote. You don't want to give more toward...
She was, at this point, she was trying to split it a third way so she could end up winning.
Right. Yeah, and Victarion, okay, Asha brings up the you is very... It's very fishy that you show up the day after your brother who banned you for the rest of his life dies. Okay, so Asha brings that up. Victarion could have said, my brother Euron has been away for 3 years. Unlike me, I've been here. I've always been here. I always will be here. I'm the Lord Captain of the Iron Fleet, my brother's right-hand man. I'm the right man for this job. I'm the next logical person.
Yeah, they all knew Euron was the one to beat, and they failed to bring him down. They had to score some points against him.
Yeah.
It sort of reminds me of sort of the Republican primaries. There was one obvious candidate that the other candidates didn't seem to want to go up against because that one was always going to win. And so they fought amongst themselves instead, like fools.
Yeah, I mean... Euron is already, he told us last chapter, he's literally sitting in the sea stone chair. So he's got possession of it, so you have to tear him down,
Yeah. I also think, this one I'm probably going to mention again during pedantry. Aeron could have put the kibosh on the whole bribery. Maybe he thought that Victarion was going to have the biggest bribe, and so he didn't want to do that. But it's a crazy, again... Comparing to United States politics, it's exactly the same. But it is a crazy way to do an election, just to allow them to pour money to the electorate.
Yeah, and, I was thinking about it this evening. Okay, so Asha got a lot of votes. Like, she got enough where it was going to be a tight contest between her and Victarion. I don't know that she would have had enough, but more than Aeron could have imagined she got. But she gave no... bribe, but that's okay because they already the captains already got all the bribe gifts from the previous candidate. Their pockets are full. They don't need bribes from Asha. So that's the benefit of going last. You don't even have to bribe.
Now you're all loaded. Vote for me. I wonder if, as they're filling their pockets with gold, Victarion's men are like, you're going to vote for him, right?
Right.
Sort of like keeping a careful eye on who's pocketing that.
What they should do is open the chests, show what treasures are in there, and say, when we start shouting for who should be king or queen,
this will be coming your way.
Right. But beforehand, not a drop of this.
But as we said, Euron had the biggest vision. He's going to conquer Westeros. And he's going to start on the West Coast, but you think there's a problem with that plan. Do tell.
Well, it's not a problem for the Ironborn. It's actually a a good situation for the Ironborn. But last we heard, which was the Cersei chapter, I think was 2 chapters ago, it was mentioned that the Red Wine fleet is passing through the Straits of Tarth, which is on the east side of Westeros, headed for Dragonstone.
Oh, to Dragonstone, that's right.
Yes. There is no equivalent fleet to defend the West Coast at this point, and why would there be? There's nothing to defend against on the West Coast unless the Ironborn are about to make an all-out offensive attack. Yeah. And now, I thought about the Lannister fleet, so I went and did some digging, and there's a quote from Martin saying that the Lannister fleet is only 20 to 30 ships. The Iron Fleet alone is 100 ships. And if they're surprise attacking them, it should be enough to give them a foothold.
So I think Victarion should say something along the lines of, Euron's going to win this because I burned the Lannister fleet. Me, this guy.
Right, I did. There used to be 100. Now they've only got 20 to 30. Did you notice, though, that Euron, the very first thing out of his mouth, he calls the collective Iron Men, not Ironborn. And I wondered if it was possibly a slight on Asha as an attempt to remind everyone that she is a woman and we are Iron Men. So, and he was and he had blue lips. Victarion thought maybe it was shadowing last chapter that his lips just looked blue, but Aeron specifically describes Euron's lips as blue. So, again, we discussed last chapter, possibly he could be drinking Shade of the Evening, the Warlock wine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yep. Aeron even himself gets swept up a little bit in Euron's speech, which is kind of funny because Euron completely neglects the Drowned God until the very last second when he says, into the glory of the Drowned God,
right,
of course.
Yeah.
And Aeron still somehow managed to get swept up in it, which is kind of a little bit embarrassing for him, I feel.
Right. He starts shouting and thinking, wait, what am I doing? He thinks to us that he had a similar thought about taking all of Westeros when he saw the Red Comet. And so I went digging to see if that was something that was, we were privy to, and it was. When Theon first got to Pike, it was Aeron that escorted him to the castle. Yes. And that is when Aeron discussed the Red Comet to Theon, and he said something along the lines of, the Red Comet was the flame that the Drowned God brought from the sea, and it proclaims rising tide. It's time to raise our sails and go forth with fire and sword. And there's no more powerful fire than dragon fire. So, I guess...
yes, I guess Euron's speech just strummed the right chords for Aeron.
Yeah.
I will say, that Red Comet, everyone sees it the way they want to see it.
It sure does, yeah. Someone was at a roulette table and they were like, Red Comet, I'm betting all my life savings on red.
So Euron's vision is enticing, but I will say that his magic flute is just glowy and loud.
Uh-huh.
It didn't actually wake dragons. He may not know that it does wake dragons. He may have been suckered. Somebody might have sold it to him for a fortune.
Right.
And it's just loud. I lived with a French horn player. That can cut through you and drive you crazy and stun you into silence.
It does not bind dragons, though?
As far as I know, it doesn't bind dragons. Maybe it does. I'm just not sure I would be convinced. The oodles of treasure might have tipped me in the other direction, I
Could
suppose.
have been. Yeah. Yeah, right. He says the horn binds dragons and that he found it in Old Valyria, where nobody but him has gone in, hundreds of years. And the Ironborn just take him at his word. Now, I will say it did seem to have an effect on the man who blew it. He had blisters and blood on his lips, and the bird tattoo on his chest was bleeding. But, again, he could just been blowing the horn really hard.
Thing is hard to blow, let me tell you. So Euron knows about Dany's dragons, that's for sure, and thinks he knows where to find them.
Right.
his information can't be that fresh because he's a good month's sailing away from where she is.
At least. Yeah. Uh, yeah, so let's play that out for a second. She's looking for allies in Westeros. He could be a valuable asset with the huge fleet to carry Unsullied and her Khalasar across the narrow sea, but there's one small catch. I doubt that she'd be okay with him binding her dragons to himself with this horn, if indeed it does bind dragons.
Perhaps he doesn't play it straight away. Perhaps
Right.
he uses his natural charm to entice her onto the boats. And then he says, "Let me serenade you, Khaleesi."
Right. I guess so. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, he doesn't have to say right away. And like I
Yeah.
said, she is looking for allies and she needs ships. He's got one of the largest ships, or largest fleets in Westeros. So maybe there could be a match there.
Yeah. Yeah. So the masses shout Euron's name, and Aeron finds only the silence within him. And then he hears the scream of that rusty hinge again as the dryer door closes on him.
That must be what it is. Now that you've painted that picture, it's all I can see.
He turned it on.
Oh my goodness.
Turned the poor kid up and down several times. He got into a lot of trouble.
I bet he
and
did.
And the little one was like...
Yeah, we do. Us older brothers, we do some regretful things to our younger siblings when we were kids.
But what we don't do is we don't spoil the rest of the books for them.
Oh, it's true. We couldn't do that.
Unless they're in the spoiler tiers. All right. Well, thank you. Those are great spoilers.
Yeah.
So much to look forward to, you non-spoiler folks. All right. Give us some background if you can.
Sure. Well, as I promised earlier, I was going to talk about Lord Gilbert Farwind. He was the first to make his case as King of the Iron Islands. He proposed sailing west to uncharted lands. He didn't get much support, but we'll show him some love by taking a deeper dive into his family and lands. So Gilbert is Lord of Lonely Light, the largest of a small collection of 13 islands, 8 days sailing from Great Wyk. House Farwind's sigil is a black longship in front of a red setting sun and an orange sky and sailing on a black wavy sea. It's actually a pretty neat sigil. The house was founded long ago when a ship sailing out of Great Wyk was blown off course and found itself among the small islands. The ship's captain built a keep with a beacon atop it to warn other ships of the dangers of the waters. He took the name Farwind and made Lonely Light his seat. His descendants still populate the island to this day, as I understand it. The small archipelago is way out into the Sunset Sea. It is significantly further away from the main islands of the Iron Islands than those main islands are from
Westeros.
the coast of Westeros. Yes. It is 8 days sailing out there. That is no joke. It is way out there. In fact, they're likely the second most westerly location in the known world. Only the tiny islands of Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys are further west, which you mentioned earlier. We'll talk more in detail about them another day.
It's all in there, Mackelly. It's all in there.
I am flabbergasted that you knew that detail.
I might have mentioned this before, but one of the things that really struck me when I visited Iceland was how the Icelandic people had visited the Americas long before Columbus, hundreds of years before Columbus. They had maps from the 1100s which showed detailed coastline of the Americas. You could see Newfoundland clearly on their maps. Yeah, they visited all the time. So honestly, I think Gilbert's he said, "Dude, I know the way. I can show you. Yeah,
just follow me. I know what I'm talking about."
Right, exactly. Yeah, and everyone's like, "Forget it." All right. Comparison with the television show, I think I've mentioned a couple of times now because we've been building up towards the Kingsmoot, and the TV show sort of raced to the Kingsmoot. Well, I say raced to the Kingsmoot. It actually was quite a bit delayed in the story, but they didn't have much build up to it. They just had the Kingsmoot, and it was just Asha versus Euron. Oh, sorry, Yara versus Euron in the TV show because they changed her name, and it ends the same way.
Okay, yeah.
They didn't deviate very far.
There was no Victarion, no Gilbert Farwind or the Drum
No,
or anybody else.
Aaron's Master of Ceremonies, but he has no character in the TV show. He's just a faceless man. Well, I mean, not literally. That would be
He's not a faceless.
That would be a whole ripple to the story.
Right.
Pedantry, it's a character decision, but Aeron knew that going last was going to be the key. Why not invite Euron to go first after the undercard?
Right. Yeah.
Give them a chance. Give Victarion and Asha every chance. Just tip the scales in their favor.
At least let Asha get out of the way. You know?
Right.
She told Victarion, I'm going to make my claim. So he could have passed that info on to Aeron and said, make sure she goes before I do.
Right. If nothing else, if she goes first, then she did well. She split the vote. But if Victarion goes after her before Euron, he probably has the majority then clearly going into that final round against Euron. Right. I agree. But as it was, they went in against Euron head to head. There was no... or neck and neck, I should say.
Yep.
And one more time, Damphair, you're making the rules. Don't allow the bribery. Again, though, that could just be a miscalculation. Maybe he figured Victarion had so much cash that he should allow the bribery because that was going to guarantee it for Victarion, not realizing how much treasure Euron had managed to bring back from Essos.
Yeah, you could make the argument that maybe that's like those are the rules of the Kingsmoot, but there hadn't been a Kingsmoot in a couple thousand years. So, who knows the rules? It would be up to Aeron to make up the rules as he went along. So, yeah, I get it.
News and notes.
Well, so our GOH Threadless site is now boarded up. So I hope you all out there got your goods before we shuttered the place. But though we taketh, we also giveth.
We do?
We do. There is a new means of interacting with us. All of you, our lovely listeners I'm referring to, should now see in the description of every episode an option to text with us. You just click the link in the description and you can send us a message that we will receive through our host, Buzzsprout.
And that works through all podcasting platforms.
As I understand it, yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm kind of excited to see who we get, who reaches out to us first.
Right. Me too.
And we have a review from John Bautista on Apple Podcasts. An absolute banger of a podcast. I like that word.
Me too.
The hosts, Simon and Mackelly, are experts at condensing the vast world of A Song of Ice and Fire into digestible hour-long segments of information and witty banter. If George Martin is the father of A Song of Ice and Fire, then these two are the fun uncles who show up to the party with board games and embarrassing stories. My God, that's true. A perfect companion piece for both new and returning readers of the series. I recommend this podcast to every fan. Now find myself hoping George finishes Winds of Winter just so I can have these two for another book. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, John Bautista. That is very, very nice and quite touching. Yes.
Thank you so much. And clever and funny.
Yes, and especially because it sings to me. I'm like, yes, that is what I want to be. I want to be the fun uncle with the board games. And the embarrassing stories.
That's right.
You gave me 2 10s?
Maybe she was a listener.
Perhaps. Yeah. All right, let's conclude this one. Everything that Victarion, Asha, and Aeron feared about the Kingsmoot came to pass precisely as they feared.
Might as well not even bothered. It was a whole diversion tactic to keep the Euron out of the Seastone chair, and it failed miserably.
Usually when George Martin tips his hand that something's coming, he then gives a little twist. But in this case, it was like, no, I told you what was going to happen, and it did.
It did. Yeah, ultimately, Asha reaped what she sowed. She knew she couldn't win. She discredited Victarion. She didn't sufficiently discredit Euron. Victarion lost. She lost. Euron won. Now, as we mentioned, Victarion could have and should have done more. Said more and prepared more. I felt like he didn't bother. He had a whole trip from Moat Cailin to Old Wyk where he had nothing to do but to come up with a good speech here.
I'm just imagining we go from the drum to Victarion talking about frogs and mosquitoes. Like, everyone's like, oh, why did we come? They're all shouting, Euron, Euron.
We've mentioned the things that they could have said. Euron's been gone
Nah.
3 years. He doesn't know you any longer like I do. The coincidence of his arrival the day after Balon's death. Without Asha's interference, maybe Euron's horn doesn't sway the Ironborn sufficiently. I don't know. The promises of dragons and ruling Westeros are awfully big prizes, and maybe in the end, Asha's impact had little effect.
But they're so abstract. I mean, like, these people, until 5 minutes ago, didn't know dragons existed, believed that dragons were mythical. And now I'm being told that the guy with the horn knows there are 3 dragons coming and he's going to bind them with the horn? Really?
Right.
They're just, the credulousness is amazing. I guess riches can blind you to these things.
Yeah.
I am reminded of a Billy Connolly joke where he said that the best job in the world had to be a nuclear bomb salesman because no one's going to go out and say, "Can I test this in the parking lot?"
Right.
I got a horn. You would not believe what it does.
Right.
If you ever find a dragon, you're going to be quids in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, he doesn't know any better than they know whether it works or not. The salesman doesn't know if it actually works.
Right. And you're sure this will bind dragons? Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
every single dragon I've ever played this to has been bound to me.
Now, I will say it looks and sounds ominous, but
for sure,
that doesn't mean that it does anything other than look and sound ominous.
You might not want to play it too near the wall.
Right. It could be. Could it be the horn of Joramund?
Exactly. That's what I'm worried about.
But so, where does Aeron stand now? He was a never Euroner, right? Like that was his thing. But it seemed like he was swayed by the plan and the speech that Euron gave. So does that mean he's a convert? Or is he unchanged and defiant and still hearing that iron hinge?
I wonder if he might try to not temper most of, because I think he kind of agrees with most of Euron's plans, but just wants that afterthought of the Drowned God to be brought more into the fold. Make this about the Drowned God. Do this for the glory of the Drowned God, and then we can be allies. We don't have to be contentious.
Could be.
And I think Euron might play along, although Euron may have sold his soul to a different god. That's definitely possible.
That is definitely possible. This smacks of R'hllor,
Yes.
Because R'hllor's not afraid to get in there and mix it up.
Exactly. The Drowned God, much like the Faith of the Seven, I'm just a watcher.
Right. Exactly.
Do what you want.
The very last bit of the chapter, Aeron digs deep inside to find the Drowned God, and it's the chapter starts with the Drowned God telling him, "I'm here with you. No godless man will sit the sea stone chair." And when he looks inside at the end of the chapter to find the Drowned God, all he finds is silence, which again I thought was a bit poetic, being that that's the name of Euron's ship.
Oh, very good. Very good. So next week we have Brienne on her search for Sansa. Good luck.
Yeah, she's got another travel companion. So see how that works out.
Unusually, I'm a little bit ahead, so I do know who her extra travel companion is.
Okay, all right.
He's bad news, that's for sure.
He doesn't come across as the most upstanding of citizens.
No, indeedy. All right, there's 3 ways that you could help us. You could leave us a positive review like John Bautista did. You could buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. There you can join us at the various sustainer levels. There's a tier to match your budget and interest, and the higher tiers get you the spoiler section. Or you can just make a donation directly to our cause at ghostsofharrenhal.buzzsprout.com.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, keeping up on the latest Ghosts of Harrenhal news and developments, well, I suggest you text us. through the link that's in the description of this episode and all the other episodes. Of course, you can also...
Excited.
It is, right? You can also check us out on our social medias. You can follow us on Twitter at GhostHarrenHall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and of course, YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.